And we'll wait a couple people for a couple minutes for people to trickle in. Okay. Hi, Karen. Nice to see you again.
Always good to see you.
It'll be fun. I have a lot of slides to cover, so people are going to have to interrupt me for questions as I go along. Otherwise, I may not leave much time. We'll see. Be fun. I'm coming fresh off of giving a different vibe coding demo, so it's fun. I'm sorry, did you say something, Stella? You were muted to me. Oh.
No, it's just my daughter. She was like also trying to register for the event so that we were in different laptops. And I mean, if she doesn't make it, she can join me. So,
Oh, well, I am recording the session too, and I'll share
oh,
it. So
great, thanks.
people can look at the link as well. She's also welcome to crowd around your laptop if you if she doesn't mind. It won't bother me. Also, hi, Sophia. Thanks. I heard there was like an event at the school, so unfortunate timing. But these things happen. I'll likely run another version of this event maybe a month from now. I'm trying to think. I've told a few people here in the US that I'm doing this, and some of them have asked if I could do it again already. So okay. Well, it's a couple minutes after, and I want to be respectful of people's time and things like that. So I think I'll get started here. So I'm Nick Wagner. I work and I run a company called Learning Journey AI. And the company's purpose is to teach people about how AI works, how to use it practically, and just generally be sort of like literate. So, a bit of an outline about this talk and sort of what it'll be about. I'm first going to lead with a set of slides just talking about what AI is and sort of where it seems to be trending towards. I'll then sort of go into what we know, to what limited extent anyway, about AI's effects on us, on humans. And then I'll talk for the last bit about my recommendations for how people can get practical AI literacy and sort of start getting ready for AI to happen. So a bit about me. I have a technical background in AI, over 10 years of experience working with it. I have a PhD in material science from Northwestern University, where I was applying AI to materials discovery. I then worked at the Institute for Defense Analyses in the Virginia area, working in national security, applying AI to sort of program evaluation. I then was a science policy fellow at the National Science Foundation in the US, where I worked on AI sort of research and development funding for universities. And then most recently, I've been working on AI workforce development at Learning Journey AI. At Learning Journey AI, we specifically offer like AI training to companies and individuals. We offer AI consulting, and we do some development work as well for people who want to build, like, say, AI agents or things of that sort. I'm also Brett's son, which is maybe a bit relevant why I'm here today. And I also just want to point out that I am still learning about AI. Despite having worked with it for 10 years, I discover new things constantly. Every single day, something seems to be happening, and things, shift. I live in the DC area, hence the photo with me at the National Press Club in Washington, DC, and I have a cat named Heidi. who I'm very proud of. And if you see her jumping across my lap during the call, she's a force of nature. So I just kind of want to preface by a lot of what I'm going to be speaking about. I'm thinking in terms of being rooted in the AI literacy framework that the European Commission OECD, in collaboration with code.org, put out a year ago. A lot of the principles, despite the fact that AI has changed somewhat since then, still basically apply. If you're not familiar with the AI literacy framework, I highly recommend reading it. It goes through a set of essentially like sort of knowledge, skills, attitudes that students should be developing in their education to work with AI. And a lot of this is not very like tool specific. A lot of it is more kind of foundational literacy. So the four kind of core things they want students to be able to do with AI are engage with it. So actually kind of recognize when you're seeing AI stuff, understand how to judge the impact, learning how to create with AI, using AI tools to build, text, images, iterating back and forth, understanding how to do prompting, thinking about like ethical considerations around like who owns content, attributing things to AI and stuff like that. Then there's managing AI. So that's much more relevant, I think, to the AI agents that are getting popularity now. So how do we actually delegate things to AI systems? How do we like sort of guide them properly, instruct them properly? How do we develop our own sense of things, agency over what humans should be doing versus what AI should be doing? A lot of that sort of stuff. And then the last thing is actually maybe designing AI. How do we think about understanding AI at the level where we can build our own AI systems? Not necessarily because they intend every student to, work at an AI lab, but more how do we influence the development of like products and use them in a way that's like beneficial for people as opposed to maybe being unethical. So if you're not familiar with AI systems and sort of how they're made, in particular, the systems that most people are going to be familiar with, the ChatGPTs, the Claudes, the Geminis of the world, they're what are called large language models, and they're called that because they're large in size. They take many sort of server racks of computers to run. They deal originally primarily dealt with language, although that's kind of broken down as they handle like images and other things now. And they are models, so they're computer models that take some kind of input and produce an output. The main ingredients for or main steps of making a model are gathering the data. So you might be familiar with how they hoover up text and images from all over the web, some of which they may be obtained in like a less than copyright scrupulous manner. There's a pre-training phase where the models are essentially looking at all of the text or data that they've gathered, and they tried to teach the model to predict the next like token or word here. So for example, if you're starting with the first three words, I rode my, the model should learn that, okay, horse is probably the most likely thing that should be said here. Maybe donkey has some chance, but like chihuahua basically should never appear in that sentence. And they do that trillions of times across like all the data that they've gathered to make these models good like next token predictors. And out of that, surprisingly, you get all kinds of general purpose abilities like the ability to write software code, the ability to properly, generate images on command, the ability to write, emails and PowerPoints, all that sort of stuff. And then there's like a third phase, which is becoming more relevant over the last couple of years, where the models, after they've learned that sort of first, just generate the next likely word step or next likely token step. They then have a step where the model generates a bunch of outputs and there's a reinforcement learning process, essentially like a rewarding process where if the model generates something that is judged correct, it gets incentivized to do that kind of behavior more. So this matters a lot for things like software development, where it's very easy to tell, or mathematics, where it's very easy to tell what a good answer is and what a wrong answer is. And so the models and those particular kinds of capabilities have gotten much better very quickly. Whereas the things where it's difficult to maybe make a judgment call, say, like writing prose, the models have advanced on doing that kind of stuff better, much more slowly. And still people find a lot of errors. And I just made a caveat here that technically this is not all AI. This is just the kind of AI that most people are going to be familiar with. And that's mostly what I'll focus on because it is the kind of AI that's most interesting at the moment. The other sort of big change in AI, the way it's developed over the last year or two, that's really gotten a lot of interest is what are called agents. And so an agent is, if you think of a chatbot from 2023, when you were using ChatGPT, it was just you and the LLM, the large language model, talking back and forth to each other. And if you ask ChatGPT to do things like, can you go onto Google Drive and edit this file for me? It would say, as a large language model, sorry, blah, 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 I can't do that. What's changed is that people have started to connect these large language models to the outside environment through what are like basically tools. So if you use ChatGPT, if you use Claude, you now have the ability to connect to say your Gmail or to your Google Drive or to say maybe like your HubSpot account if you're like in marketing. And through those tools, the model can then do things like act on the environment and get some kind of feedback as to how successful that action was. And the models have gotten progressively better at doing this, and that's let them do things that were originally beyond their limitation. So one of the problems that large language models had when they were first developed is that once you finish the training step, there's essentially a inability to keep it updated with what's happened since then. So you would ask a model like the beginning of 2020, say five, who's the president of the United States, and it would say Joe Biden because it didn't have the ability to search the web or whatever. Now that they can search the internet through using tools, they can stay more grounded in current information, and they can say interact with like systems that change frequently, like databases, stuff like that. And the models are much more able to handle open-ended tasks that you weren't able to directly specify before. So not everything is advancing equally, though. So despite the sort of like hype, this is a chart from a nonprofit called Meter that's based in the Silicon Valley. And what this chart is showing is that over time, on the x-axis, the models have become better and better at doing software engineering tasks that took humans longer and longer. So you can kind of see on the left-hand side here that, in 30 seconds, a human can answer a question, but it might take them a few minutes to count the words in a passage. It might take them more than 6 minutes to find a fact on the web. And then to do these sort of AI engineering research tasks, it would take hours or longer. And the models have gotten, with some error bars, better and better at doing those things. And we're getting to the point now where the measurements we don't have data points, essentially. We don't have records of humans sitting down and timing themselves doing all kinds of stuff. So we're getting to the point now where the models are so good, it's hard to tell how good they are at doing some things. I will note that this is not 100% success. So one of the other limitations, if you used AI at all, is that they're not reliable. Sometimes they'll give you a good answer, sometimes they won't. And so the line here is for 50% success. So half of the time they succeed at doing these tasks correctly. And that's a big problem for tasks where if you make some kind of mistake, it's it's difficult to either check or it's difficult to deal with the consequences of getting a wrong decision. If we look at other measures, it's kind of like compounds this sort of picture. So this is a benchmark. It's essentially a test about whether AI models are good at doing remote work. And the way they created this test was they took an online jobs platform called Upwork, and they asked real people to grade AI output and say, like, would you find this acceptable? Like, would you have been paid money to do this work? And what they have found is that if you look at the sort of y-axis here, even the very best models from Anthropic, from the Manus Corporation, from OpenAI, Grok, and Gemini perform at less than 5%. So we're not at least at this point in time, really able to fully automate jobs, even ones that only take place on a computer, let alone ones that involve, say, moving stuff around in the physical world, where large language models are not good. So what does this kind of mean for, say, humans and the future of work? Unfortunately, the kind of short answer is we really aren't certain yet. It's not immediately obvious that everyone is going to lose their jobs, but it's also not immediately obvious that things will stop here and the models won't keep getting better. There are some questions I think that'll be evergreen that we're still trying to puzzle through and our economists are still trying to work through. What is it that's going to be scarce in a future with better AI systems? Because things by nature that we can't have an abundance of will continue to be expensive. Is the hiring sort of like job cuts that we're seeing now, are those due to AI or are they due to some other reason? is hiring vanishing now? It's unclear from the macroeconomic data in the US at least. I'm not sure about Europe per se, but it's not immediately obvious that there's a gigantic destruction of hiring. There's still in software engineering, which is the industry most exposed to advances in AI. There's still roughly the same number of job openings this year as there was, say, 2 years ago, but there's a larger pool of students competing for those jobs. So it looks like the job market isn't very good, but also it's not immediately obvious that people have no need for humans anymore. And the AI industry rapidly grew during the pandemic, or the tech industry grew rapidly during the pandemic. So it's unclear if people announcing layoffs today are doing them because AI is actually good, or they just want to save money, or cover up a mistake that they made in hiring in the past. One possibility comes from Alex Emaus, who's an economist who writes online. His sort of belief is that the relational sector, or essentially jobs that require humans to provide service to each other in person. So you can imagine like maybe being like a butler or something. That is not the kind of thing that you would pay an AI for, even if an AI could kind of do it, because a lot of the goods value comes from, say, the status of having a human doing it for you. So even as perhaps the economy is growing rapidly and we're automating a lot more tasks, there's still a growing sort of job share of people who are doing things like maybe like healthcare or education that require a human relational component. But this is just one possibility. We don't necessarily know if this relational sector will actually grow that big. It could be that most people will just settle for cheaper digital equivalents, even if they're not as good as the human ones. Or it could be that even the relational stuff could be potentially automated. Now, one thing that comes from the AI literacy framework report is the sort of state of affairs around whether students themselves, and I guess the teachers as well, think that they are prepared for AI. And the short answer is no. About, a little bit over half of people, and kind of across all the questions that they ask, don't think that they are ready for AI. They think AI is going to be a big deal. But in particular, if you're a student, about half of them at this time in 2024 thought that their school was not adequately preparing them for AI. And I would doubt that if you redid the survey at this exact moment, that the answer would be better. If anything, it might be less good, but I won't speculate too much here. And this survey was in particular was done in the European Union, or sorry, in Europe. So the results may be a bit different for the US. So I'm going to shift gears now and talk a bit about what we understand about AI's effects on our sort of cognitive abilities. This is a question that I get a lot from people. Should my students be using AI? Is it for the students themselves? Is it rotting my brain? There's a lot we don't know, but there's some existing cognitive literature out there. And I think a lot of it can be summed up by it depends. A lot of people in a previous era were concerned a lot with screen time. So is my child being on the iPad all day rotting her brain or rotting his brain? And the answer I think that we came out of that is the same as what I'll say for AI, which is it depends. So if you're just watching mindless YouTube videos all day, that is very different from you're watching, say, math and science videos teaching you some new subject. But both of those things are sometimes mismeasured as the same exact thing. And AI, I think, is similar to that. There's different ways of using AI. So this is kind of an eye chart, but this is a summary of about 30 studies for the cognitive science literature that exists right now. One thing I'll note is that a lot of this literature deals with adults and not children. So there's a lot of uncertainty around how children in particular, say, have their brain activity modulated by AI. But for adults, we can already sort of tell that there's some concerning trends. So one is that if you're just sort of passively using AI, just like accepting whatever answer comes out, people's brain activity starts dropping off. If we instead are like actively using AI, so directing it, you're creating something, iterating back and forth, asking for questions and getting challenged on your thinking, that can actually do the opposite and sort of engage your brain more. If people are say not very skeptical by nature, people often end up trusting the AI systems too much. And especially people who are already predisposed to trust AI are more likely to accept AI mistakes than people who are less, or sorry, more skeptical. There's other sort of study results on answering AI can hurt, like hurting retention, transfer, and reasoning. But if you instead have a system that instead of just giving answers, is operating like a tutor and not giving you the answers, just giving you hints, asking questions, they can actually improve your thinking and improve your learning. One other thing that also had, besides the lack of studies on kids, is we obviously, this technology is brand new. There aren't a lot of long-term studies out there yet. In the short term, we've seen that AI can help make work faster, easier, and better. But we can also have noticed that sometimes it can reduce the sort of motivated practice that is necessary for building the capability. So as we think about training junior employees, perhaps, or like interns or people to take on more complicated work so that they become middle career and late career workers, we have to think about how do we kind of build those skills without with the existence of AI systems that can reduce some of that work. And again, I just want to kind of rehash this point that not all AI systems are created equal. If you design a system to be actively engaging, that is not just giving you the answers, that challenges you, that can actually encourage your cognitive development. On the other hand, if you have a system that's just passively trying to do all the work for you, those systems can replace your thinking and can lead to sort of longer term declines in mental capability. So it all depends. It's not necessarily an easy answer. And I'll link the source at the end, but this comes from a Substack roundup. So given these trends that we've seen, so AI capabilities are advancing, but not evenly. Some things are being done quite well. Other things aren't being done so good, and it's not reliable. AI can improve your mental reasoning, can improve your thinking, but it can also make it worse depending on how you use it. Given all of that, what is it that I recommend people do to start practically getting ready for AI? So I have four things that I'll kind of go into in a little bit more detail. The first is one, to just start using AI in some constructive way to get familiar with its strengths and limitations. The second thing is adopting habits that keep your mind sharp and sort of keep you from giving in to this learned complacency, learned helplessness. The third is actually maybe a little bit counterintuitive, perhaps not to everyone here, but the more AI advances, the more I think offline communities of humans actually really matter a lot. And I think more people should invest in that. And the last thing is just an attitude, I would say, of precaution. So there's so much that we don't know about kids in particular, and we have enough maybe indications that things aren't necessarily totally rosy. So I recommend taking some caution when it comes to your kids in particular. So I have a few practical recommendations for AI project ideas. So there's a lot of things that you can do that are quite simple that actually are very helpful to your own life. So I have a few here. So I recommend people start with trying to organize files on their computer. It's super easy to do. It's often something that we don't like doing, but we appreciate when it's done. And models are very good at that kind of thing. Building apps is another thing that I recommend a lot of people do. It's very simple to do these days, especially one that helps you learn something. So I made an example app here that uses photos from, say, me and my girlfriend, or my girlfriend and I, to teach us a language. So this is actually Ilocano words on the bottom, which is a language spoken in the Philippines. And we generate custom storybooks with like different sort of like key terms for learning words. Other things that are fun, especially to do with like your kids, are building games. Kids love building games. As long as I've been teaching programming, it's something that every kid has demanded that I do, is teach them how to make Minecraft or how to make Fortnite or something like that. You can get a bit closer these days with AI coding tools. And then also just like looking at data that's relevant to your life. So I know a lot of people who are applying for jobs. So I help them analyze their LinkedIn data to understand which people in their network could be giving them referrals for positions that they maybe weren't aware of. Especially if it's like across industries or it's with someone that they hadn't remembered that they even knew. Some of these AI coding tools are quite good. If you are on a budget, I recommend starting with Google Anti-Gravity as a product because it has a free plan and you can build quite useful things with it. If you have more of a budget, I recommend switching to Claude and using Claude Code. And very quickly, I'll just kind of show what that sort of looks like in practice. So let me start Claude here. So I'm running this on a Mac, but you can also run this application on Windows, sorry, as well. And so I have some folder here. Let me go to my desktop. And I have, oh, that's not the one I'm thinking. Okay, so I have a folder here and it has uh, my resume in it and it has a headshot in it. I can just say, what is in this folder? Turn on this auto mode here. And I'm using Claude Code for this. So this application is an agent. So it's actually not just talking to me, but it's actually going and running commands, doing stuff on my computer. And so it's able to figure out on its own sort of what's happening to answer these questions that I have. While that kind of loads, I might show an example here of something else that I built. So this is in Google Anti-Gravity. I wanted to make a portfolio site that shows off my resume for people who, just want to figure out my professional background. So with a single command, just like the other one I had, I built this entire website. And it has like little kind of fun stuff here. Like there's a little text prompt thing where I can type commands and it'll show off like, okay, here's what my projects were in sort of fun ways that go beyond just having a PDF. And I have a timeline with my professional experience in it, the dates that I was doing things there. I have little cards with here are projects that I've built using AI and other things that I've constructed. Here are the skills, my resume, and the speaking engagements that I've done. All of this was built without writing any code. I just asked, make a website from my resume and the photo in the folder. These sorts of tools make projects like this much more accessible. Okay, let me go back to, oh, sorry, let me just share this. So that was like the project ideas. In terms of things I recommend for habits for keeping your mind sharp, not giving in. So one of the first things I recommend is always reading primary material directly. A lot of people just read the AI summary or they read ChatGPT's, recommendations based on what gets sent to them, and they never check the original source material. That's a surefire way to like miss things. AI will either sometimes make things up, but also subtly distort things. I've had cases where, say, making that job site, AI models have just invented experiences that I didn't actually have, and I wouldn't necessarily knew that unless I was familiar with the source material. So that's one habit. Another is forming opinions before you ask the AI model. A lot of people, they'll just accept whatever the AI recommends they do. And if you have your own opinion that you state first, it helps you to kind of anchor and realize, like, oh no, like when it said that I should do option X, I was thinking I should do Y before. And now that I hear it recommend X, it doesn't make any sense to me. If you wait to have the AI present opinions to you first, it narrows, tunnel visions you on the things that it considers acceptable, not what you would do on your own. One other thing that is like surprisingly easy, but a lot of people don't know to do it by default, is just to ask the model to ask you questions as you do things. Oftentimes that gets it gets you to realize that there are things you want the model to do that you yourself didn't know. And it also just kind of encourages you to question your assumptions and make the model sort of question its own assumptions about what it is you're trying to do. Going back to like earlier, asking for hints instead of solutions is a very good thing to do, especially if you're in a mode where you're trying to learn intentionally, as say like a student. If you're just getting the solutions, that shortcuts your brain's sort of ability to reason through the problem. Another thing is to maintain hobbies without AI intermediaries. So it can be as simple as like playing sports or, like being in a chess club, doing something where an AI is not in charge of making all of the sort of critical thinking decisions about what happens. Having something like this is a really good way to like keep your mind engaged. And last thing is a really hard one I find personally, but even when models are almost always right, and 9 times out of 10, when you're skeptical and you say like that can't be right, I want to check, and then you're like, oh no, it actually got it totally correct. Even then, like not deferring entirely to AI systems is a habit that I think people should have. Just because if you don't have this, how are you ever going to know when the system is sort of fooling you? And it can be tricky. Okay, so keeping doing AI projects, keeping your mind sharp. I think one thing that is maybe outside of just your own efforts is working on trying to maintain a community. So in DC, I help run several different meetups that get together to talk about AI policy, to talk about using AI tools, to talk about things outside of AI. Those sorts of connections help keep me informed on like what is happening in a way that I wouldn't just get in my own kind of like little bubble. They also help to keep me grounded, I think, in the real world and sort of what other people are going through. It's very easy to kind of get lost talking to AI systems, hearing their explanations, having them do things for you. You can feel incredibly productive, but then also be totally alone as you do those things. I think a lot of people, when I tell them this, they immediately jump to like, well, I don't have the time or I don't have the understanding to run, say, like an AI, seminar or an AI workshop. I don't think you need to really complicate things that much. Just having the sort of small, intimate, like dinner groups or say like a group chat where people can say like, hey, I'm doing this and I'm noticing that it's like being weird, or I'm trying to like do this kind of, make a game with like my son. Has anyone ever done that before? Those kinds of things, in my experience, have proven to be almost more valuable than the real conferences that I've gone to because they're sustained over time and people are free to really, I think, talk about how they feel about these tools and admit the mistakes that they've made or how things aren't working the way they're supposed to. And that could be quite valuable. Another thing is sort of speaking about the bigger community, maybe than just your local community. AI is a tool. I think a lot of people have this sort of fatalistic view that it's just coming down the pike and there's nothing we can do to stop AI from happening to us. A lot of the ways AI is going to impact us are not set in stone. So, like a good example is in the US, CEOs are claiming that they're going to have to fire people because AI is going to replace them. But they don't have to do that necessarily. You can imagine a world where those people get AI tools, but they're allowed to do new kinds of work, or they're trained in offering better service, or they're free to focus on tasks that humans are required to do that AIs can't handle very well. That's like a choice. And how our society adapts to the capabilities of AI is not not set in stone. It's not guaranteed it's going to play out one way. That's both sort of like a local economic decision, but as well as like a political one. I think there's a lot of room that we have for how society adapts to AI. And just like earlier when I said AI can be helpful or harmful when it comes to the cognitive effects, I think AI can be a great tool for bringing people together, but it could also be a tool for, isolating us and kind of putting us into our own bubbles. Like again, it comes down to like a choice. I think there's a strong opportunity here for people who are very pro-socially minded to use AI to help build tools that sort of unite people, help people find each other, help people organize, and take away the grunt work that prevents people from sort of existing as a cohesive society if people are willing to like put in that effort. And I think you'll see a lot of nonprofits and companies kind of spin up to try to do this kind of thing. So this last point that I want to mention here, in particular, when it comes to like kids and AI, most of the popular AI products now have parental controls. ChatGPT in particular, I know does, where you can limit how much time your kids are allowed on the systems. I think in particular, given the uncertainties in the cognitive literature, I would be careful about allowing unlimited unsupervised chatbot time because again, you don't necessarily know if your kids are using the systems just to like, do their homework or if they're using the systems to like learn things or build things. Those are very different kinds of activities, and you should have some sense about like what your kids are doing. The second thing is to try to instill as much as possible a sense of skepticism and fight anthropomorphism. I know with some kids that I've talked to in particular, there's a strong sense of, well, ChatGPT said it, so it's true, or ChatGPT is my friend, or they tend to assume a lot more human-like capabilities of these systems than are realistically there. And I know it's very challenging, especially like as the models get better and they're right more often and they are trained to be helpful and friendly, to sort of fight that intuition that no, these things are not like, your friends or your parents. They are, unfeeling groups of numbers in a computer somewhere else in the world. And while they may be helpful in some way, they're not necessarily watching out for you the way like others in your life are. And then the third thing, which I don't know if it's shocking to people or not, but it's something that I think bears repeating is this technology is so new and changing so fast that you can't assume that, say, the schools, your government, um, basically the institutions around you have a firm handle on everything that's going on and that they're going to do what's best. They themselves have a lot of uncertainty. They themselves have a lot of learning to do about what is AI is capable of, how it should be used. So I encourage parents, especially, to be involved, I think, in their schools and try to contribute in a positive way to correct like misinformation about how AI works, to get students, to make sure students are sort of practically aware of the strengths and limitations of AI, to make sure that they're actually gaining AI literacy, as it were, in their school, because that's not necessarily guaranteed. So if you're interested in learning more about things, I have a few resources that I linked here. I'll send the link to these slides in a second, but I have three main ones. So one is a website that I maintain. It's targeted primarily as a community site for people in the DC area who work in AI policy, but it has a lot of links to other resources that are useful for people around the world, both on like courses and other blogs and guides for using AI. Another blog that I recommend in particular is called One Useful Thing. It's by Ethan Mollick, who's a business school professor at University of Pennsylvania. He writes a lot about just practical recommendations for like which AI's tools to use, but also how AI is affecting work, how it's affecting education, and just like life broadly. And the last thing that I would note, the third source I'd recommend is the Batch, which is a newsletter that is put out by deeplearning.ai, which is an online AI education site. And the batch has a lot of like current news. It has a lot of takes on technical matters as well. But it's generally a pretty well written resource, and it's by an expert in the field of machine learning and AI as well. So just to reiterate, AI is advancing rapidly, but not equally across everything all at once. AI will not by default make us smarter. It will not by default make us dumber necessarily either, but it's up to us sort of on that. And I recommend start building your AI skills, protect your mind, be careful with your kids, and seek out community. Thank you. So I have some time here for questions. If you are interested in following the company for future events, or if you're interested in, potentially coaching or things of that sort, my company site is linked to the QR code. I also have a LinkedIn here, but you can also look up Nicholas Wagner on LinkedIn and find me there as well. So with that, let me stop sharing here. And I will very quickly, before I start taking questions, just share the link to these slides in the chat so people can view them later. And feel free to come off video mute if you can. I have a bit more of a human face here. Are there any questions?
Hey, Nicholas.
Mhm.
This is Brett. For those of you who don't know, I did kind of give an introduction during one of at the school and a little bit, I think, in the chat rooms that Nicholas is my son. And so, um, and when I kind of knew what he was doing and how he was engaged with AI, I thought that it would be a good opportunity for us as parents parents within ISB to learn a little bit about it because I think there's a lot of curiosity and about how AI is used and a lot of fear about how it's used and how it's going to impact on our children. So just for your situational awareness, the people that are in attendance here are, I think, exclusively parents of children that attend the International School of Brussels. Um, I would actually, especially after hearing your presentation, I would like this to be made available to the teachers, to the educators as well, because I think that probably the educators or the teachers, I should say, have a lot of the same misconceptions that I think you've addressed, things that you've answered, and they could probably hone in on a little bit more because especially the high school teachers, they've probably seen AI tools being used by students for good or ill, I guess, and they probably have a lot of questions about what it means for them as educators. And like you said, I think you made a good point about saying, don't assume that institutions, in this case, the teachers at ISB, know more about it than we do. I think there's a lot of frustration with educators. They feel like they're not kept up to date. I mean, they have a full-time job, and that's teaching kids and trying to stay up to date on AI tools and technology when it changes so quickly. It's a challenge for them in the best of times. And then, they probably have kids that are farther ahead on the technology edge than they are. So I think there's a lot of intrepidation for the teachers. I would really like this to be made available to the teachers. I don't know exactly how to do that. Maybe some of the other parents that are online have an idea of maybe the best venue for trying to make this a presentation like this, either the recording if we can't do anything else, or a live session available to the teachers. I think that would be, from my perspective, that would be valuable. I would like the teachers of my children to have this kind of level of awareness, even though my children are quite young. Probably it's a little bit more useful for middle school and high school kids where they're actually using the tools a little bit more. But yeah, I would really like this to be available to them because I think that the topics you talked about were very valuable. Does anybody else out there have an idea of how to get into the teachers? And there were some other questions.
I mean, I'll speak on mine. I'm happy to share the recording if they want that. I'm also happy to give a dedicated lecture to teachers in particular. But yeah, thanks for that context. And yeah, I know, like, I feel like the things that teachers have thought were important for the longest time, like the critical thinking, the like drive to push ahead and like resist, overcome failure and kind of keep learning and that curiosity are more important than ever. The question is like, how do we get people to develop those skills, especially when they're kind of students are besieged on all sides by technology. I saw Emma, you had a question about the privacy side of AI. Yeah, I unfortunately didn't get the chance to touch on that much. One of the recommendations concretely that I recommend everyone do is there's a setting in most AI applications that says something along the lines of help improve the models. And usually if you go to like settings, privacy, you'll see this sort of setting there. That setting, what that usually does it lets the companies train on your data. And for almost everyone, especially if you have kids who are using the systems, I recommend turning that off. There's very little benefit to you concretely for having the systems be better in the future. And that information, if they're holding on to it for years, um, you don't necessarily know in some future generation of the model like what's going to be done with that data. Even if you don't have that setting on and you've opted out of training, sometimes they will still retain the data for a certain amount of time. So in Anthropic's case, I know they retain data for 30 days, and they say that's because they want to have like safety checks in place. So if someone were to have a conversation where they were trying to engage in self-harm, for example, they would want to have the data so they could go back and look and see like, okay, when did the model start like indulging that behavior if it did? Like how did the user kind of get around the safeguards and things of that sort? But that still means that your data is being held in some computer somewhere outside of your like own machine or your own control. So there's still potential implications there. Sometimes AI tools kind of creep up in unexpected places. So an example is like a meeting like this. You might have some kind of AI tool and then not realize the contents of the meeting were sensitive. That this is a mistake that kind of people commonly run into in the US where medical data is regulated in a certain way. I'm not sure in the European Union similar things apply. But people will engage in like private conversations that are being captured by some AI tool and being recorded somewhere, and they don't realize that that's like a privacy violation. So it can be quite tricky. I do think that there are trade-offs as there are to everything. My personal view is that if you've opted out of training and you're working with some like personal data, I would think of things not too dissimilarly from Google Drive. If there's stuff that you would be willing to upload to Google Drive and have Google Corporation like take care of it for a while, like I view that as like not too dissimilar from how I view interacting with some of the AI systems. If you work at a company where or a government where you're dealing with information that absolutely cannot just go onto a commercial system, that is where I think you should invest the time and money into having an enterprise agreement where you have firm guarantees that the data is not going to places it shouldn't be and is on systems that are properly secured. But if you're an individual working with, say, like information that's not that important, it's not necessarily bad. Also, not all companies are reliable actors in the same way. I should point that out. One situation that I was reading about recently is in China, there are ways you can access frontier models, which are nominally illegal to use in mainland China, or at least, sorry, the companies that supply them, say Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, do not allow most of their models to be accessed in mainland China. But there are people that essentially resell accounts and provide access in ways that subvert that. And oftentimes, what those people are charging is way less than the sticker price that you would pay in the US. But the downside of that is that they're taking that data and selling it to other people to basically make money and like cover the cost. And sometimes that information is like sold to criminals. Sometimes it's sold just to, whoever wants to buy it for marketing purposes. There are AI services out there that are 100% less reliable or less trustworthy than some of the leading tech companies, and you should be cautious of that. Sorry, I know it was a long-winded answer, but that's my take on the privacy side of things. What will happen to people who don't want to adopt AI in their day-to-day activities? Will this be a possible way of working still in 5 to 10 years from now? Um, I certainly think it's like possible. Whether it'll be as common or not is another question. And I think this goes back to my point about how we adopt AI is kind of a choice. I think there's 100% situations where it makes no sense currently to adopt AI, even if someone wanted to force you to do it. So, for example, we had a college in Arizona, where I'm from, in the state of Arizona, that used AI to try to read off everyone who had graduated and like basically do the commencement announcement. And AI, no one asked for that. It did not work. And so it like missed like 100 names and people basically rioted. And that was the kind of situation where like the tools were like just weren't ready for the task and someone should have used their judgment and not tried to do that at all. There are other places though where the AI models are becoming quite good. And it might be more similar to like now, where it is possible to imagine a person who only uses checks to pay for everything, but it's quite difficult and you have to go out of your way to imagine doing that. But that is kind of like a choice. Maybe like the broader example would be using cash. So there are societies now where almost everything is cashless. You have to go out of your way to try to like figure out a way to use cash to pay for things. But there are some countries where they have laws saying that you have to support those people. Like, there has to be an accommodation for them to still use cash to pay for things because they accept that not everyone is either able or willing to use digital currency. And so you might imagine that some kind of accommodation like that exists in some places, but not in others. I don't know. It's hard to imagine. There's a lot that will change to make the models better in that time, but also society tends to not accept very drastic change in a way that potentially is harmful to people. So I could see a world in which the technology becomes much better, but we choose through policy to not allow certain uses of AI in certain kinds of work and things like that. But all of that aside, I do think the modal person will be using AI way more in the future, mainly just because it's so useful to work with. If you haven't already spent the time to try out Claude Cowork or Claude Code or OpenAI Codex to try to do some work on your computer, I highly recommend trying it and just kind of sort of seeing the experience. I think everyone has a moment when they try one of these tools where they first realize, wow, it's like thought of doing things for me that I didn't even need to ask for, that in a way that's like super useful. And also it's like surprised me in some way that I wouldn't have been able to do. And oh, and sorry, and that it surprised me with like what potential things I could be doing with it. And it'll open up this sort of realm of like productivity. It sounds kind of dystopian when I put it that way, but more like the idea is that you could do so many things to make your like work better, make your life better, that I think a lot of people will voluntarily adopt AI as they sort of come to learn about it. And not all AI is the same. So some applications won't have that adoption mode as well. Thank you for the very good questions, Emma. I appreciate them. Any other questions? I can make the recording available. I'll send the link to the recording after the talk ends. So I know some people registered but weren't able to attend. If there are no further questions, I'm happy to give people back the time. I also, in the link to my slides, I believe I have my contact information as well in the beginning. If not, let me actually just include that in here. If you want to ask me further questions, you can reach me by email, nwagner@learningjourneyai.com. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all. Hope you all have a good rest of your, I know it's evening in Brussels, but afternoon here. Okay. Bye, all.